The badge glinted under the streetlight, a tiny rainbow pinned to Ezra's jacket, screaming defiance in a world that didn't always listen. He was 18, wiry, with dark hair that fell into his eyes and a heart that beat too fast when he saw Julian smile. Tonight, in the pulse of Seattle's Capitol Hill, that badge would cost him blood. Ezra walked hand in hand with Julian, their steps light despite the late September chill. The neon glow of bars and cafes spilled onto the sidewalk, mixing with the hum of laughter and music. Julian, 18, with blonde curls and a laugh that could melt ice, nudged Ezra playfully. "You're gonna get us in trouble with that thing," he teased, nodding at the pride badge. His voice was warm, but his eyes flickered with worry. Ezra grinned, reckless. "Let 'em stare. I'm done hiding." They'd met 6 months ago at a youth center support group, two kids navigating a city that preached acceptance but didn't always deliver. Ezra, sharp-tongued and fearless, had grown up in foster homes, learning early to fight for every scrap of who he was. Julian, softer, raised by a single mom in a small apartment, carried his fears quietly but loved Ezra's fire. Together, they were unstoppable, or so they thought. The trouble started at the corner of Pine and Broadway. Two cops, Officers Malone and Carter, leaned against their patrol car, eyes scanning the crowd. Malone, mid-30s, stocky with a buzz cut, spotted Ezra's badge first. His lip curled. "Hey, kid," he called, voice dripping with authority. "What's that on your jacket?" Ezra's grip on Julian's hand tightened, but he didn't flinch. "It's a pride badge. You got a problem with it?" Carter, taller, with a cold stare, stepped forward. "Watch your tone, punk." The air shifted, heavy with menace. Julian tugged at Ezra's sleeve, whispering, "Let's go." But Ezra's feet stayed planted. He'd spent years swallowing insults, shrinking himself to fit. Not tonight. "Free country, right?" Ezra shot back, his voice steady but his pulse racing. Malone laughed, a low, ugly sound. "Not for kids like you." Before Ezra could blink, Malone's hand was on his shoulder, shoving him against the patrol car. Julian shouted, "Stop!" But Carter blocked him, one hand on his baton. The badge, that tiny symbol of courage, became a target. Malone ripped it off, tossing it to the ground. "You think you can parade this crap around here?" he growled. The first blow came fast, a fist to Ezra's stomach, doubling him over. Julian lunged, but Carter shoved him back, hard. Ezra gasped, trying to stand, but Malone's boot caught his ribs. Pain exploded, white-hot, stealing his breath. The street spun, faces blurring, passers-by frozen, some filming, others hurrying away. Julian's voice broke through, desperate. "Ezra, please stop." But the cops didn't stop. Not until Ezra was curled on the pavement, blood trickling from his lip, the badge crushed under Malone's heel. They left him there, crumpled, with a warning, "Stay out of trouble, kid." Julian dropped to his knees beside Ezra, hands shaking as he touched his face. "I'm here," he whispered, tears streaking his cheeks. Ezra tried to smile, but it hurt too much. "Worth it," he rasped, clutching Julian's hand. But inside, something broke. Not his spirit, but his trust that the world might let him be. Across town, in a cluttered apartment overlooking Puget Sound, Marcus Kane sat at his desk, a half-empty coffee mug beside him. At 42, he was a man of sharp edges, broad-shouldered, with graying stubble and eyes that had seen too much. A former FBI agent, he'd walked away from the Bureau 5 years ago, burned out by politics and betrayal. Now he worked private security, piecing together a life for himself and the son he barely knew. Marcus hadn't seen Ezra in years, not since the divorce when Ezra was 10. The boy had chosen his mother, then foster care after she passed. Marcus carried that guilt like a stone in his chest. When his phone buzzed with a text from an old contact, a grainy video of a kid beaten on a Seattle street, his blood ran cold. The kid was Ezra, his son. He watched the video twice, hands trembling. Ezra's defiance, the badge, the cop's fists. It was a gut punch. Marcus had failed him once, leaving him to a system that chewed up kids like him. Not again. He grabbed his jacket, mind racing. Those cops didn't know who they'd just crossed. Marcus Kane wasn't just a father. He was a man who knew how to make people regret their choices. By midnight, Marcus was at the hospital where Ezra lay bruised but unbroken. Julian sat beside him, holding his hand, their bond a quiet rebellion against the world's cruelty. Marcus stood in the doorway, heart pounding. Ezra looked up, eyes wary. "What are you doing here?" he asked, voice rough. Marcus swallowed hard. "I'm here to fix this." Ezra snorted, wincing as he shifted. "Little late for that, Dad." The word stung, laced with years of absence. But Marcus didn't flinch. "I know," he said quietly, "but I'm not leaving this time." Julian glanced between them, protective but curious. Marcus saw the love in his eyes for Ezra, the kind that doesn't back down. He nodded to Julian, a silent acknowledgement. This wasn't just about Ezra, it was about the life he was fighting for. Marcus spent the night digging. His old FBI contacts still owed him favors. By dawn, he had names, badge numbers, and a paper trail of complaints against Malone and Carter. Excessive force bias incidents swept under the rug. The system protected its own, but Marcus knew its cracks. He'd exploit every one. Ezra's story wasn't just his. It was a spark in a city simmering with tension. The video had spread online, hashtags like Justice for Ezra trending by morning. Protesters gathered outside the precinct, rainbow flags waving. Julian stayed by Ezra's side, whispering promises of better days. But Ezra, bruised and bandaged, felt the weight of it all. "They'll get away with it," he muttered. Julian squeezed his hand. "Not if we fight." Marcus, meanwhile, was building a case. He tracked down witnesses, secured footage from nearby cameras, and called in a lawyer friend, Aisha, a black woman in her 30s who'd spent years fighting police misconduct. "This isn't just about Ezra," she said, her voice fierce. "It's about every kid they've hurt." Marcus nodded, his jaw tight. He'd make sure Malone and Carter faced more than a slap on the wrist. This was war. Ezra lay in the hospital bed, the beeping of machines a steady reminder of the night before. His ribs ached with every breath, but the pain in his chest wasn't just physical. He kept seeing Malone's sneer, the glint of his badge as it caught the streetlight. Julian sat beside him, scrolling through his phone, reading messages of support pouring in from strangers. "They're calling you a hero," Julian said softly, his blonde curls catching the morning light. Ezra shook his head. "I'm no hero. I just wanted to be me." Julian set the phone down and leaned closer, his hand resting on Ezra's. "You are," he whispered. "You're braver than anyone I know." Ezra met his eyes, and for a moment, the hospital room faded. It was just them, two kids who'd found each other in a world that didn't always make room for their kind of love. Ezra wanted to believe Julian, but doubt gnawed at him. What if this was all he'd ever be? A kid beaten for a badge. Across the city, Marcus was in motion. His apartment had become a war room, papers strewn across the table, laptop open to a database only ex-agents could access. Aisha sat across from him, her sharp eyes scanning a report. Malone's been cited 3 times for excessive force, she said, tapping the screen. Carter's no better. They've got a history, but the department keeps burying it. Marcus clenched his fists. Not this time. He'd spent the morning calling witnesses, baristas, clubgoers, a street vendor, who'd seen the attack. Most were scared, but a few agreed to talk. One, a trans woman named Riley, 25, with fierce eyes and a shaved head, had recorded the whole thing. I've seen them hassle kids before, she told Marcus over coffee at a quiet diner. They target anyone who doesn't fit their idea of normal. Her voice shook with anger, but she handed over the footage. It was clearer than the viral clip showing every blow, every word. Marcus thanked her, his mind already on the next step. He knew the system. Cops like Malone and Carter thrived because people looked the other way. But Marcus wasn't people. He'd spent years dismantling networks of corruption, and he'd do it again for his son. The thought of Ezra, bruised and defiant, fueled him. He hadn't been there when Ezra needed a father, but he'd be there now. Back at the hospital, Ezra was restless. He hated the sterile walls, the pitying looks from nurses. Julian tried to keep him grounded, telling stories about their first date. A clumsy picnic by Lake Washington, where Ezra had spilled lemonade all over Julian's lap. They laughed, but Ezra's eyes kept drifting to the window, where protesters' chants echoed faintly. They're out there for you, Julian said. Ezra bit his lip. They shouldn't have to be. The door opened, and Marcus stepped in, his face set with purpose. Ezra tensed, still unsure about this man who'd reappeared after years of silence. What's the plan, Dad? He asked, the word heavy with sarcasm. Marcus didn't flinch. We're building a case. Witnesses, footage, complaints. Those cops aren't untouchable. Ezra raised an eyebrow, skeptical. You think the system cares about kids like me? Marcus met his gaze. It will when we're done. He pulled up a chair, laying out the plan. Aisha was drafting a lawsuit, and the viral video had caught the attention of a local journalist, Diego, a 28-year-old Latino man who'd been covering police reform for years. Diego wanted to interview Ezra, get his story out. It's your call, Marcus said, but your voice could change things. Ezra hesitated. Speaking out meant reliving the pain, the humiliation. But Julian's hand in his was steady, grounding. Do it, Julian urged. For us, for everyone. Ezra nodded slowly, a spark of his old fire returning. Okay, let's make them listen. Diego arrived that afternoon, his camera small but professional. He sat across from Ezra, his warm brown eyes kind but focused. Tell me what happened, he said simply. Ezra took a shaky breath, then spoke about the badge, the cops, the fists. His voice cracked, but he didn't stop. Julian held his hand, silent but fierce. Diego listened, nodding, his camera capturing every word, every bruise. By evening, Diego's article was live, paired with Riley's footage. The headline screamed, Seattle teen brutalized for pride badge. Where's the justice? The story spread like wildfire, fueling protests outside the precinct. Rainbow flags mixed with signs demanding accountability. Marcus watched from the sidelines, his jaw tight. This was bigger than Ezra now, it was a reckoning. But Malone and Carter weren't backing down. Marcus got word they'd filed a report claiming Ezra had resisted arrest. It was a lie, but a clever one, designed to muddy the waters. Aisha cursed when she heard. They're playing dirty, she said. We need to hit harder. Marcus agreed. He reached out to an old bureau contact, Elena, a 45-year-old data analyst who could dig deeper than anyone. Find me everything, he told her. Bank records, texts, anything that ties them to corruption. Elena delivered. Malone had a history of shaking down local businesses. Carter was linked to a shady cop union that buried complaints. It wasn't enough to convict, but it was enough to pressure the department. Marcus leaked the dirt to Diego, who ran a follow-up story. The public outcry grew louder. The precinct was under siege, figuratively and literally, as protesters camped out, chanting Ezra's name. Ezra, still in the hospital, saw the news on Julian's phone. "They're really fighting for me?" he whispered, almost disbelieving. Julian smiled, brushing a lock of hair from Ezra's face. "Because you're worth fighting for." For the first time since the attack, Ezra felt something like hope. But he knew the battle was far from over. Malone and Carter had the system on their side, and systems didn't break easily. The hospital room felt smaller each day, the walls closing in on Ezra as he waited to be discharged. His bruises were fading, but the ache in his chest lingered, not just from the blows, but from the weight of being a symbol. Social media was ablaze with his name, his face, his badge. Julian stayed close, reading him messages from supporters across the country. "You're trending again," Julian said, half smiling. "They're calling you the Pride Kid." Ezra groaned, pulling the blanket over his face. "I just wanted to wear a stupid badge." But it wasn't just a badge anymore. It was a battle cry. Outside, Seattle's streets pulsed with protests. Rainbow flags waving alongside signs reading, "No justice, no peace." Ezra watched the live streams on Julian's phone, his heart swelling and sinking at once. He was grateful, but he was tired. Tired of being a victim, a hero, a cause. He just wanted to be Ezra, the kid who loved Julian and dreamed of a life where they could walk hand in hand without fear. Marcus, meanwhile, was relentless. He and Aisha met daily, building their case like a fortress. Elena's intel had given them leverage. Malone and Carter weren't just rogue cops. They were part of a network that protected bad actors. Marcus uncovered a pattern. Complaints against them vanished, witnesses recanted, evidence disappeared. "Someone's pulling strings," he told Aisha over coffee at a downtown cafe. Her eyes narrowed. "Then we cut the strings." They needed a break, and it came from an unexpected source. Riley, the trans woman who'd recorded the attack, connected Marcus with a whistleblower. A rookie cop named Sam, 24, non-binary, who'd seen Malone and Carter's tactics firsthand. Sam met Marcus in a dimly lit park, their voice low. "They target kids like Ezra," Sam said, hands stuffed in their hoodie. "Queer kids, black kids, anyone they can intimidate. The precinct knows." Sam handed over a USB drive, internal emails, memos, proof of cover-ups. Marcus felt the weight of it in his hand. This was dynamite. He passed it to Aisha, who worked through the night, cross-referencing names and dates. By morning, they had a timeline. Malone and Carter had been flagged for misconduct 8 times in 3 years. But their sergeant, a grizzled veteran named Holt, had buried every report. Aisha grinned, fierce. "We've got them." Diego's next article dropped like a bomb. Seattle PD's dirty secret. Cops protected despite brutality. The USB's contents were redacted but damning, naming Holt as the linchpin. Protests swelled, spilling into downtown. The mayor's office issued a statement, promising an investigation, but Marcus knew better than to trust promises. He needed action. Ezra was released from the hospital that afternoon. His ribs still tender, but his spirit stubborn. Julian helped him into a wheelchair, teasing, "You're gonna milk this hero thing, aren't you?" Ezra smirked, but his eyes were distant. At the hospital entrance, a small crowd waited, supporters, reporters, even a few kids from the youth center. They cheered as Ezra appeared, holding up signs. "We stand with Ezra." He froze, overwhelmed. Julian squeezed his shoulder. "You've got this." Diego was there too, his camera ready. "One more interview?" he asked gently. Ezra nodded, though his stomach churned. He spoke about the badge, about loving Julian, about wanting a world where no one had to be afraid. His voice shook, but it carried. When he finished, the crowd clapped, some wiping tears. Ezra felt exposed, but Julian's hand in his kept him steady. That night, Marcus took Ezra and Julian to his apartment. It was awkward. Ezra barely knew this man who called himself Dad. But Marcus tried, cooking a simple pasta dinner, asking about their lives. Ezra was guarded, but Julian opened up, talking about his mom, his love for painting, his dream of studying art. Marcus listened, nodding, and for a moment, Ezra saw something like regret in his eyes. "I should have been there," Marcus said quietly. Ezra didn't respond, but he didn't leave the table either. The next day, Aisha filed the lawsuit, Ezra Kane versus Seattle PD, naming Malone, Carter, and Holt. It wasn't just about damages, it demanded accountability, policy reform, mandatory bias training. The news hit hard, with Diego's reporting amplifying every detail. The city was divided. Some called Ezra a troublemaker, others a hero. Hate mail poured in, but so did support letters, donations, even a mural of Ezra's badge on a Capitol Hill wall. Malone and Carter, feeling the heat, doubled down. They spread rumors through back channels, claiming Ezra had provoked them, that he was a delinquent with a record. It was a lie, but lies stick. Marcus caught wind and went to war. He tracked down every foster home Ezra had been in, collecting statements from caseworkers who vouched for his character. "He's a good kid," one said. "Just needed someone to believe in him." Marcus did now. He met with the mayor's aide, a sharp woman named Priya, 35, who saw the political firestorm brewing. "We want this handled quietly," she said. Marcus leaned forward, his voice low. "My son was beaten for being himself. There's nothing quiet about that." Priya promised a public inquiry, but Marcus didn't trust it. He needed insurance. He found it in Sam, the whistleblower. They agreed to testify, risking their career. Marcus coached them, drawing on his FBI days. "Stay calm. Stick to facts. Don't let them rattle you." Sam's testimony, paired with the USB evidence, would be a hammer. But the precinct was fighting back. Holt, the sergeant, had powerful friends, and word spread that he was pulling strings to discredit Sam. Ezra, meanwhile, was struggling. The attention was suffocating, and the hate mail cut deep. One night, he broke down in Julian's arms, sobbing. "Why do they hate me?" he whispered. Julian held him tight, his own eyes wet. "They don't know you, but I do. And I love you." It was enough to keep Ezra going, but barely. He wanted to fight, but he was scared. Scared of losing, scared of what it would cost. The courtroom loomed like a battlefield, its polished wood and stiff chairs a stark contrast to the chaos outside. Ezra sat in the front row, Julian's hand clasped tightly in his. At 18, he felt too young for this. Facing lawyers, judges, a city watching his every move. But his badge, now pinned back on his jacket, was a reminder. He wasn't backing down. Marcus stood nearby, his suit crisp but his eyes tired. He'd barely slept, pouring everything into this fight. The hearing was for a preliminary injunction to suspend Malone, Carter, and Holt pending the lawsuit. Aisha argued fiercely, her voice steady as she presented the evidence. Riley's footage, Sam's testimony, the USB's damning emails. The judge, a white woman in her 50s named Larson, listened intently, her face unreadable. Malone and Carter sat with their lawyer, a slick man named Grayson, who painted Ezra as a defiant teen who'd escalated the situation. Ezra's blood boiled, but Julian's thumb tracing circles on his hand kept him grounded. Sam took the stand, their voice shaking but clear. "I saw Malone and Carter target kids like Ezra before," they said. "They'd laugh about it in the locker room. Holt covered for them every time." The courtroom buzzed, reporters scribbling furiously. Grayson tried to rattle Sam, questioning their loyalty to the force, but Sam held firm. Marcus watched, proud but tense. Sam was risking everything. Outside, protesters chanted, their voices muffled through the courthouse walls. Diego was there, live tweeting every moment. The city was electric, divided between those who saw Ezra as a victim and those who called him a troublemaker. Hate messages still flooded Ezra's inbox, but so did support. Letters from queer kids across the country, thanking him for standing up. One, from a 15-year-old in Ohio, read, "You make me feel like I can be myself." Ezra kept it in his pocket, a talisman. Aisha called Ezra to testify. He walked to the stand, heart pounding, feeling every eye on him. "Why did you wear the badge?" Aisha asked gently. Ezra swallowed, glancing at Julian. "Because I'm gay. Because I love him. Because I shouldn't have to hide." His voice broke, but he kept going, describing the attack. The pain, the fear, the humiliation. The courtroom was silent, even Grayson still. When Ezra finished, Julian's eyes shone with pride. Judge Larson adjourned for deliberation, and the wait was agony. Ezra, Julian, and Marcus sat in a courthouse cafe, picking at sandwiches. "You did good," Marcus said, his voice gruff. Ezra shrugged, still wary. "Doesn't mean we'll win." Marcus leaned forward. "We're not just fighting for a win. We're fighting for you." For the first time, Ezra didn't look away. The injunction was granted. Malone, Carter, and Holt were suspended, pending a full investigation. The crowd outside erupted, rainbow flags waving. But Grayson vowed to appeal, and Holt's connections ran deep. Marcus knew this was only a skirmish. The real battle was coming. That night, Ezra and Julian walked through Capitol Hill, the air crisp with autumn. The mural of Ezra's badge glowed under streetlights, surrounded by flowers and candles. Julian stopped, pulling Ezra close. "You're changing things," he whispered. Ezra kissed him, soft and sure, the badge glinting between them. For a moment, the world felt right. But trouble wasn't done. Marcus got a call from Elena. Holt was pulling strings, pressuring witnesses to recant. One, the street vendor, had already backed out, scared. Marcus cursed, slamming his fist on the table. He needed a new angle. He reached out to a hacker friend, Leo, a 30-year-old non-binary tech genius who'd worked off the books for the FBI. "Dig into Holt's finances," Marcus said. "If he's dirty, I want proof." Leo delivered 2 days later. Bank records showing payoffs to Holt from a local businessman tied to the cop union. It was enough to tie Holt to corruption, maybe enough to break him. Marcus shared it with Aisha, who filed a motion to expand the lawsuit. Diego ran the story. Seattle PD sergeant linked to bribes. The protests grew louder, the mayor's office scrambling. Ezra, meanwhile, was grappling with his role. He spoke at a rally, his voice raw but strong, Julian by his side. "This isn't just about me," he said to the crowd. "It's about every kid who's scared to be themselves. We deserve better." The cheers were deafening, but Ezra felt the weight. He wasn't a hero, he was just a kid who wanted to love without fear. At home, Marcus and Ezra had their first real talk. "I messed up," Marcus admitted, his voice low. "I wasn't there when you needed me." Ezra looked at him, years of hurt in his eyes. "Why now?" he asked. Marcus took a breath. "Because I see you, the man you're becoming. I'm proud, Ezra. And I'm sorry. It wasn't enough, not yet, but it was a start." Ezra nodded, a crack in the wall between them. The city was changing. The precinct announced new training, and the mayor promised reforms. But Holt was still out there, and Marcus knew he wouldn't go quietly. The fight was far from over, but Ezra had Julian, and now maybe he had his dad, too. For the first time, he felt like they might win. The trial date loomed, a storm cloud over Seattle. Ezra, now back at the youth center, tried to reclaim normalcy, but normal felt like a dream. He and Julian painted murals with the kids, their hands brushing as they worked, but the weight of the fight clung to him. At 18, he'd become a symbol, his badge a beacon for some, a target for others. Hate mail still came, but so did letters of love, tucked into his bag like armor. Marcus was a machine piecing together the final blows. Leo's financial records had cracked Holt's armor, linking him to a web of corruption that reached the cop union's top brass. Aisha used it to expand the lawsuit, demanding not just justice for Ezra but systemic change. Diego's reporting kept the pressure on, his articles shared thousands of times. The city was a tinderbox, and Ezra's story was the spark. Holt fought back, his lawyer spreading lies about Ezra's past, digging up old foster care records to paint him as troubled. It stung, but Marcus countered with affidavits from caseworkers, teachers, even Julian's mom, who called Ezra family. The truth was stronger, but the lies still hurt. Ezra read one online comment calling him a thug, and threw his phone across the room. Julian caught him, holding tight. "They're wrong," he whispered. "You're everything." The trial began in a packed courtroom. Ezra testified again, his voice steadier now, the badge pinned proudly to his chest. He spoke of love, of fear, of fighting for a world where no kid had to hide. Julian watched, tears in his eyes, as Ezra owned his truth. Aisha presented the evidence, footage, emails, bank records. Sam testified again, their courage unshaken. Malone and Carter squirmed, their lawyers' arguments crumbling under the weight of proof. Marcus took the stand, his FBI training keeping him calm but his father's heart bleeding. "My son was beaten for being himself," he said, voice low but fierce. "I wasn't there for him before, but I'm here now, and I'll make sure this never happens again." The jury listened, some nodding, others stone-faced. Judge Larson's eyes softened, just for a moment. The verdict came after 3 tense days. Malone, Carter, and Holt were found liable. The jury awarded damages to Ezra, but more importantly ordered sweeping reforms, bias training, oversight boards, a public apology from the precinct. The courtroom erupted, cheers mixing with sobs. Ezra hugged Julian, then, hesitantly, Marcus. "Thank you," he whispered. Marcus's eyes were wet. "I'm sorry it took this long." Outside, the city celebrated. Protesters danced, rainbow flags flying high. Diego's final article read, "Ezra's badge, a victory for love." The mural on Capitol Hill grew, painted with messages of hope. But Ezra knew it wasn't over. Hate still simmered, and reforms could fade. He and Julian walked to the lake that night, the badge glinting under the moon. "We did it," Julian said, his voice soft. Ezra nodded, leaning into him. "We're just getting started." Marcus watched from a distance, giving them space. He'd rebuilt a bridge with Ezra, fragile but real. He'd stay this time, not as an agent but as a father. Aisha and Diego planned a follow-up campaign, ensuring the reform stuck. Sam, now out of the force, joined the youth center mentoring kids like Ezra. Riley painted her own mural, a rainbow fist raised in defiance. Ezra and Julian sat by the water, hands entwined. The badge, scuffed but unbroken, rested between them. "What's next?" Julian asked. Ezra smiled, the first real smile in weeks. "We live, we love, we fight." The city hummed around them, imperfect but changing. Ezra's badge wasn't just his anymore. It was a promise, carved into the heart of Seattle, that no one would be beaten for being themselves again.